Unboxing the Internet, take one.
Unbox the Internet.
Hi everybody, my name is Monica, this is Judith, and this is McKenna. Judith and I are both professors in the Department of English at Lakehead University, and we're currently working on a project that is looking at fan criticism, specifically fan criticism online. And as many of you may have known, there was a controversy recently where David Gabriel, the head of marketing for Marvel, came out and said that diversity is not selling. And so we've engaged in, we're working on a paper, and one of the things we're looking at is how people have commented on this controversy, both in blogs, in journals, and online. And so what we want to do for you today is we're going to combine a review video with an unboxing video, two favorite genres of internet videos, and we want to unbox some of those comments and discuss amongst us what we think is going on or how we want to participate in this. And we also want to say a shout out to Max behind the camera, who this is his lab and he is helping us out today. So do you want to start, McKenna, by unboxing our first comment?
Sure.
We have to point out that Judith made a beautiful box.
Okay, what does the internet have to say?
I'm guessing something terrible. We'll find out.
So, the Black Wolf, number 4, on Jesse Shadeen's IGN.com article said, "I'm a black man and my issue is that you shat all over the original in the name of diversity, and it was not even legitimate. Marvel had the potential to really go beyond, but they crapped all over the characters that worked for years and replaced them with children who suck." This is also related to a point made by the Fifth Horseman on Beth Elderkin's IO9 article on April 1st that said, "This all happened because hipsters, millennials, or whatever, who never read comics before, decided to read them after the movies started coming out. They decided they don't like the status quo and started chattering at Marvel/DC to change what has worked and replaced it with what they think it should look like. That ended up alienating a lot of older readers who have invested in the titles for decades, and they stopped buying comics at that point."
I was thinking about that bifurcation of audiences, which the second comment points to.
What's a bifurcation, Judith?
What's a bifurcation? You have two different audiences. You have the traditional audience, the ones which Gabriel's actually addressing because he's talking at a retailers summit, so of comic book store retailers who represent their clientele. Yeah. But there's two different ways, well, actually many different ways people consume comics. The people who are newer to comics tend to be buying them in trades, tend to be buying them on the internet. And they're interested in different kinds of comics. So if you're just listening to the ones from the retailers, who are talking to the retailers, you're going to get a more conservative idea, an idea that you don't want to change comics. Yeah. And if you're going to have the newer fans, they're going to possibly be a little more interested in different comics. And the question here, which I think a lot of the commenters on the internet are wrestling with, is that idea that you have two different audiences with two different needs, or at least two different audiences with two different needs, two different desires, and how do you address both of them? Do you do what Wilson, who writes Ms. Marvel, says, and create two different lines with different marketing strategies? Yeah. Or
I don't know. I mean, one of the things it comes down to is something that everybody in fandom is well familiar with, which is this: who's a real fan? Who gets to count as the true fan? And, you know, there's theorists who have gone on about this for quite some time. There's ways in which fans create hierarchies. So I've been in it the longest is one of the ways that people go, that's what makes me a fan. I know the most trivia, background story, inside out. I have great knowledge. That's what makes me a true fan. But also problematically, I'm the group that has always been represented and constructed as the audience. In this case, in comics particularly, white males, right? And so there is this two audiences, but I would also argue, and I think you'd agree, women and people of color have always been there. We have always been fans. Like, I've read comics, you know, in the 80s and 90s. My mom, who is now 79, God bless her, loved Batman and loved Superman. They just weren't represented. And so this idea that, you know, there's these newfangled fans who are coming in and taking it away. I would argue that they've always been there. They're just hopefully now maybe being more represented. But I mean, to go back to the point about, should we make new characters instead of, this is such a large problematic thing, instead of getting rid of the old ones. Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, definitely. The suggestion to make new characters does have some positive views to it. For example, one Reddit commenter named Yak Johnson talked about Falcon becoming Captain America, and he said that giving Falcon a title that wasn't his but was possibly more popular means that he needed a handicap in order to have his own title, which is a fair statement to make.
Yeah, and I think that was one that was really super interesting, is that a lot of people have pointed out that there are existing characters out there that have been sort of lying dormant for years, and rather than making Hulk Korean or Spider-Man and Miles Morales, that instead they should give them their own title or revive some of those dormant ones that had their own lines or support and promote them. So I think there's a fair comment there.
However, when they do that, and this is one of my pet peeves, is Red Wolf, which had a lot of potential. Red Wolf was 70s character in Marvel Comics, one of the Avengers back in the very old days.
One of the many Avengers.
One of the many Avengers. He was never a really big character, and he got his own title for the first time in the all-new, all-different lineup. It lasted 6 issues, and that is because it was not good. And so and even before it came out, Indigenous people who are very much into comic books. There's a whole Indigenous Comic-Con going on in Albuquerque. It's going into its 2nd year this year.
There's the identity of Indigenerd, which is super awesome.
Yeah, there are a lot of Indigenous comics anthologies. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening with Indigenous comics, and Red Wolf took a lot of the stereotypes that were problems with the 1970s iteration of the character and just replicated them. Put Red Wolf in the past and brought him forward into the future as an anachronism, as a time-traveling creature, suggesting that Indigenous people always exist in the past, and if they're existing in the present, it's out of time.
I want to add to that, and I mean, I think you will as well, and it's hard to say because it might come up in later comments, but the question of, and this came up over and over again, lots and lots of people said, I support diversity. The problem is, this diversity is being done badly. And so do we want to touch that now, or do we want to wait and see if it comes up in the comments? Because that's a huge one that I think, what thoughts?
Well, if we're talking about new characters that were written badly, America Chavez is a new character. She wasn't necessarily part of the All New, All Different lineup, but she does have her own solo series that started around the same time All New, All Different started. And just like with Red Wolf, there's commenters saying that it's a horribly written character. But in reality, I've read her books and it's not that horrible or as horrible as
as
the
they make it
internet.
out to be.
Yeah, so it's strange that when there are new characters being made for the diversity, they still get all the backlash that the replaced character or the replacing characters get.
Yeah, I'd say that the question of quality of the diversity is a complicated one. So one of the complaints that many people make is diversity is a marketing gimmick for Marvel. And what I would say is, if it is a marketing gimmick, it's something that they're simply pushing for sales reasons. This combined with another comment that a lot of people made, that is that there is a weakness in the creative bench currently at Marvel, that they're losing out to things like Image, and more creator-driven comics. I can see the potential for diversity to be done badly if you don't have a particularly strong writing bench and it's being pushed. Having said that, I haven't seen real evidence, aside from Red Wolf, that it is actually being done badly, and I think that this might come down to something like taste. The idea of what fans want. Maybe they have more traditional action-based comics that, don't go into politics, though that seems confusing to me because Marvel has always gone into politics. But something like Mockingbird, it was just an amazing comic. Like, it was just smart, sharp, well drawn, well written, great characterization across the board. but it was also parodic and sort of sexy and playful in a way that maybe might turn people off. But for any woman who's been in fandom for any length of time or read any fan fiction, that's perfectly normal style-wise. So the question of just its diversity done badly, I think there's a legitimate complaint there, but I also think I agree with you. I think a lot of things get called bad that are actually fine, or in some cases actually very good.
Yeah, there was one guy on the Sheeden, Jesse Sheeden, IGN.
Apologies if we're pronouncing your last name.
Yeah, yes, article. He was called The Rain 12, and he spent around 3 hours, you could see him having a "someone is wrong on the internet" argument. His point was, these characters are good, you people haven't read them. And a lot of the people were saying, well, I'm not interested in them and I don't want to read them, they are bad. And he kept saying, but you don't know they're bad if you haven't read them. And one point I liked was someone came on and said, can you say this isn't as good as The Dark Knight or Sandman? Can you honestly say it's as good as those? And he goes, those are classics. If you're holding everything up to the pinnacle of the best things that have been produced in the past 20 or 30 years, it's not fair. And, you know,
I guess, I mean, my question for you guys too is like, ask me about my feminist agenda, right? Is this deliberately something that's going to turn people off? I mean, part of me goes, hey, I read X-Men for years when I had to deal with like, you know, big-breasted women in scanty outfits that make no sense fighting, and I had to sort of look beyond that to enjoy the characterization. I wouldn't see that the same. I wouldn't say they should look beyond this, but what do you guys think? Does that problematically turn people off?
Definitely on the internet. Commenters say it has.
Which is too bad, and I would say the internet commentators, it's like, give these things a shot, because I think what we come down to is like, you have your taste is your taste. Nobody's saying that you should buy a comic for moral reasons, but I would say if you're just having a backlashy feeling, it's gonna keep you from reading something awesome that has mer-corgis in it. Yes. Corgis who are mer-corgis.
They live under the water.
They live in the Bermuda Triangle specifically. Like, how is that not awesome, right? So I think, what do you think?
Yeah. And also with Ask Me About My Feminist Agenda, I think I'd sort of covered her up on the box, but she actually is very much showing off a very comic book, beautiful body. Mm-hmm. And so she's allowed to be sexual and feminist at the same time.
Yeah. And there's actually very little feminist agenda in it.
No.
I'm a feminist. The mer-corgis are not a large part of our agenda, but we'll embrace them. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's I think this question of marketing diversity and, you know, whether or not that in and of itself is not the right way to go, so much as just simply writing diverse characters, I think is something we'll probably get to.
We seem to have talked a little more than we were planning on that time, so I think we're going to cut it short for now. If you would really like to hear what you have to say, so add your thoughts on the comments and make sure to like, subscribe, and review us.
And expect to see more videos, because apparently we have lots to say.
Thank you very much.
Unbox the internet. Nerds will find a way. Unbox the internet. What's with kids today? Wonder Woman, Spider-Man. Look out now, I'm just a fan, but I've got something to say, and that's okay.